We're ready to head down to Houston as it's the inaugural American Athletic Conference Championship game. You can listen to that game right here on WHIP Saturday as the Owls will be going up against the Houston Cougars. And now joining us is the commissioner of the American Athletic Conference, and that's Mike Aresco. Mike, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Thank you, Zach. I'm doing well and really looking forward to this championship game. Thank you.
Well, so are we, and I actually remember the first ever American Athletic Conference game, and it was played between these two teams of Temple and Houston. So is it very fitting that these two teams now play in the first ever American Athletic Conference Championship game?
Well, very interesting, Zach, that you mentioned that. I've been thinking about that, and probably we host a little dinner for the presidents and our ADs of the participating teams tomorrow, and I'll mention that. Interestingly, the very first conference game, and we have a coin that commemorated our opening game, was Houston at Temple. And it just so happened that year, 2013, that those two teams did not have a non-conference game early in the season. I think it was the second week or so. And so they played a conference game, and it was the very first one in their new conference. And now here we are, 3 years later, 2 years later, playing a championship game, and it's Houston and Temple. And look at what's changed. And Zach, this is a perfect example of the progress we've made. That first game probably was pretty lightly attended, and I think the Houston people, it was the first year in this new conference, and here they are playing in Philadelphia, where they really didn't have much in common with obviously Temple and our league, and it just seemed, I knew it was going to be a work in progress. And now look, you've got a real rivalry brewing here in terms of Houston Temple. The status of our league is elevated beyond belief. We've had 3-4 teams in the college football playoff and other rankings all season long, and we probably could have even had more. And the progress all our teams have made, it's just gratifying to see where the conference is right now. And you harken back to that day, and you say, "Wow, look at the progress these two teams have made." Neither of them were particularly at the top of the league back then in 13, so it's really great.
You've had so much success this year in the conference as a whole. Like you were saying, there was 4 teams in the top 25 at one point. Going into the season, did you have a feeling that this was going to be the case, that you would have this much success?
I didn't know how much progress we would make this year, but I absolutely thought we would make progress, and I also thought that we would get ourselves we would play well enough to get ourselves in the P6 conversation. And I said so at Media Day in the summer, and I think that probably was met with a lot of skepticism, and I understand that. But I really did think, when I looked around, with the coaches we had in place, with the quarterbacks we had, I thought we had 6 or 8 that were as good as any in the country, with the returning starters, with the recruiting we'd done, with the TV deal in place that had been giving us some pretty good exposure. I thought all the pieces were in place to make some significant progress. I also thought that we would probably win more of the games against the so-called P5, and I like to call them P5 as opposed to this power, non-power. I hate that terminology, as you know. But the point is, I thought we would do better. Last year, we were competitive in so many of those games. We played about 2 dozen among all those P5 teams. And Zach, as you know, we play the best of the best. We don't typically play their weaker teams. Yes, we did have a game against Kansas, and we had a few, but not many. Most of them were really tough games. I mean, you played Penn State and Notre Dame, and we had a lot of those kinds of games. So we thought we'd do better. Last year, we only won 3 or 4 of them. We thought we needed to double that total. I didn't know that we'd get there, but sure enough, we did. We won 8 against the P5, and more tellingly, our top teams were 5-0 against the P5, and our middle-level teams were 3-3, and the 8 or so games we lost to them were lost by our lower-tier teams, which also play really tough schedules, and all of those teams showed improvement. Tulane and UCF struggled, but we saw rapid improvement among SMU and Tulsa, even though they did not have great records, because they play such tough non-conference schedules. So yes, I thought we could do it. I didn't know quite how far we'd get. I'm thrilled that we've done as well as we have. The issue for us now, Zach, is sustaining it. Sustainability is an important term right now for us. We have to show people that we can continue to do it. We want to be in that P6 conversation, figure out a way to knock that door down. It's really important, because otherwise we will not get the respect we deserve.
With sustainability, a big thing that would help is if you get to keep some of these coaches around. Fuente, he left for a new job, and then you have rumors about Matt Rule. But today, Matt Rule said he plans to be at Temple for a long time, and obviously Tom Herman was addressed. With these coaches right now in the American Athletic Conference, if they're leaving, that means you have success. But how do you get some of these coaches to stick around in the AAC? What are some of the advantages your conference provides?
I think that's a really good question, and I think it's probably a three-part question. What do we do? And then again, what happens if they leave, and what does it mean if they stay? I think you have to have a good program with good leadership, and you have to have visionaries, and you have to have support among not only your administration but your fan base. And I think what Temple's done under Neil Theobald and Kevin Clark and now Pat Kraft is they have a real vision, and they're on a mission to make this a first-rate program, which it is now, and this is a new Temple, and you need that first. Your coach has to feel that he's got the confidence, that he's confident that he has the administration behind him, and then he's also got to feel that the league is a good league, and that there's a chance to compete at a high level in the league, and also a chance to be on New Year's Day and to play in a really good bowl game. I think that's also very, very important. Also, TV exposure, I'm sure, is a factor too. We have 5 ABC national games this year. We'll have 5 once we play the championship game on Saturday. That's remarkable. We've had ESPN and ESPN2 and ESPNU and CBS Sports Network all season long. Temple's gotten more exposure in the last couple of years than they probably had in the prior 15 years, and it's been great for the program. So I think a coach needs to have all those things in place. One thing I want to mention, I was talking to a retired commissioner recently, and he said, one of the things you've been saying that I think has really resonated, and you should keep saying it, is this is not your grandfather's Temple. It's not your grandfather's Memphis. Those are programs. Temple had some success over the years, but very sporadic. But there's a real commitment there now. If you look at what Neil Theobald is trying to do, and you look at what the board is trying to do in terms of the new stadium, in terms of building this program, the commitment they made to a Matt Rule to get a coach as accomplished as Matt, who had done a great job as assistants over the years, and who's a young, really obviously top talent. What they've done to keep him and to get him here to begin with, and to keep him and to support him. This is different than Temple of the old days. And as you know, Temple was in the Big East and then was no longer in the Big East and hadn't really made the commitment that it's making now. That's really important, and that's something that is sustainable. That's a commitment that Temple wants to make, and I think Temple probably is seeing, the benefits of that. That if you do it right, and they're very proud, and they should be, 26 seniors, and they're all going to graduate on time. And that's a tribute to Matt. That's a tribute to Neil and Pat and Kevin and the administration there. And that's key. If you do it the right way, it can do a lot for your university. I think you're going to see admissions spike. I think you're going to see, more community support, more donor support. You, Zach, were there. You know how excited everyone was for the big weekend against Notre Dame. You know how transformative that experience was for the city of Philadelphia, embracing college football the way they did, embracing Temple, a record rating on ABC, the highest they'd ever gotten for a college football game on ABC. You had 40 buses come down from Temple to game day at Independence Hall. You had just a tremendous, a great crowd, and almost won the game. And even though we don't believe in moral victories in this conference, and Matt Rule will be the first one to tell you that, as with the Temple players, I mean, they gained a lot from that defeat in terms of just national respect and admiration, and would love to have won it, almost did win it. But the point is, they showed that Temple football had really arrived. And this is something that I do believe is sustainable. If you look at that roster, a lot of great players, a lot of people coming back. Sure, you'll miss Tyler Matakevich and Ioannidis and some of the really top players, but you've got a lot coming back and a lot coming into the program because of Matt and because of what the administration's done. Same thing at Memphis. You saw what Justin Fuente did. And let me get to the last part of your question, and that was, okay, what do you do when you lose coaches? Well, again, that's going to be an issue for us, of course, because there's still a certain lure with the P5, and we have to deal with that. But we want to show how good a conference we are, and if you play in our conference, you'll have a chance to succeed and go to New Year's Day, and maybe even have more visibility than if you were a program that maybe doesn't do as well in those conferences. Well, we did lose Justin Fuente to Virginia Tech, and I tip my cap to Justin for what he's done for our conference. I thanked him, and he he and I had a nice conversation. He did a great job at Memphis, and by virtue of that, for our conference itself. But it doesn't look right now like we'll lose anyone else. Matt appears to be staying at Temple, and we, of course, hope he does. We think Tom Herman is going to stay at Houston. That would be terrific. And then you've got our great young coaches like Philip Montgomery and Chad Morris that have already made a major impact. We have, obviously, some veterans who are still around. Bob Diaco has made great strides already at UConn. Kenny Niumatalolo has been very happy at Navy. Tommy Tuberville, at Cincinnati. Willie Taggart, good young coach, has now turned the corner at USF, which might be playing as well as anyone in the country. And UCF just hired Scott Frost. Now, Tulane's got to make a coaching hire, and I'm sure they'll make a good one. They have a new AD who's extremely well thought of, and Danny White at UCF is extremely highly regarded. He's already hired someone that everybody is applauding. Scott Frost, who was the offensive coordinator at Oregon, the old Nebraska quarterback. So you have to just keep finding good young coaches if you lose some. And the prototype for that is Cincinnati, when they had Mark D'Antonio and then went to Brian Kelly, then to Butch Jones, and now to Tuberville. You end up with really great coaches. Memphis has got to replace a Justin Fuente with a good coach, and I think they will. And I think we will lose a few here and there, but if we can get by this year, only losing one or so or two. Then with these teams that we have, young teams, the quarterbacks returning, whether it's P.J. Walker or Greg Ward Jr. or others, we are going to be in great shape. The Clinton Flowers, who's blossomed at, no pun intended, at USF, is doing great. We've got quarterback back at UCF so they can rebuild their program. You've got quarterbacks back at SMU and Tulsa, which have high-powered offenses. Cincinnati's got two good quarterbacks coming back. East Carolina will have three. You're going to have, UConn's got its quarterback back. You're going to have a league that is on the move, that has, plenty of returning players, and we'll just see where it goes. But we've got to sustain it.
We're spending a few minutes with the commissioner of the American Athletic Conference, and that's Mike Aresco. And, Commissioner, most people expect the winner of this game to be playing on New Year's between Temple and Houston. In the future, do you hope and do you think there could be a possible situation where an American team is considered for the main college football playoff of those final four teams?
I hope so, Zach, because I think we deserve that consideration. I'm glad you raised this point, because I do think we are likely to be playing New Year's Day. The winner of this game seems to be a play-in for New Year's Day, and either team is going to be, whoever wins, is going to be a very worthy opponent for someone in either the Peach or the Fiesta Bowl. And because they're the only ranked teams now in the top 25, you would have to assume that the winner would go, but you never assume anything in this world. So we'll just keep our fingers crossed, but that's what we fully expect. But you talk about, okay, down the road, the playoff. Well, we thought this year that had Memphis, continued to win, and had Temple beaten Notre Dame and continued to win and had been undefeated, and if Houston had stayed undefeated, they should have gotten serious consideration for the top four. And one of the points I've been making, and I want to continue to make it, and I hope the media helps us make it, because I think we deserve that consideration. College football has changed. Just as I said, this is not your grandfather's Temple. It's not your grandfather's college football either. The power is not all concentrated in a handful of schools. And the P5, yes, those schools have reputations and traditions, but they're no better than our teams. And I am convinced that our 5 or 6 or even 7, top teams could defeat most of those teams, and our top teams could play competitively with anyone in the country. Temple proved that with Notre Dame, and we've proven it all season long, whether it's against Ole Miss, or whether it was against Miami, or whether it was against Notre Dame and other teams that we played this year, and whether our lower tier teams played competitively with the top teams from other conferences. I wish some of our top teams had been able to play, Florida State and Oklahoma. I'd love to see USF be able to have a rematch with Florida now, based on where they are from where they were at the beginning of the season, when they really didn't have, the quarterback play and some of the other things they have now. We have got to convince people, when you go through our conference, you run a real gauntlet, and it's just as tough as it is in the Big 12 or the Pac-12 or the Big 10 or wherever. And if you look at Temple as a perfect example, I think this Temple team has been underappreciated by the media in the country and by the college football playoff. committee, I think they do a heck of a job. They do a really good job. But I think Temple, first of all, has a very convincing, resounding victory over Penn State, which ended up having a very good season, as you know, and played competitively and lost a heartbreaker to Northwestern, and beat Illinois 39-0, and lost to Michigan with 28-16, very competitive game. That Penn State had a good season, and Temple 10 sacks, 27 unanswered points, and then they had to immediately go out and play one of our better teams in Cincinnati. While they had an up and down season, that's a very formidable, dangerous team, and they won that game. And then obviously they had some non-conference games, but then they had to begin a bit of a gauntlet, and they had to play at East Carolina. You know how tough East Carolina is, and you know how good they can be, and you know how tough they are at home. And they have tons of talent. They barely lost to Florida in the swamp. They went out and almost beat BYU. They beat Virginia Tech this year. They're a very good team. And you had to go down there, and you won with under 4 minutes left. It was a tough, hard-fought game. Then you had to come back and play one of the most emotional games of the year. And I know the team treated it like any other game. But, it just wasn't like any other game. Incredibly emotional weekend. You played a great game. A few plays at the end here or there, the swing pass, the third down play, the pass in the end zone, a few plays, and you would have won the game. Point is, you played great, and that was a tough deal. And so consequently, that was game day came, an emotional weekend. Then the team goes out, has another road game out at SMU, a team that can score, and it's very dangerous because it does score. A team that was only down 42-37 to TCU with 8 minutes left in the game, when TCU was pretty much, dominating every other team that had played. And that's a tough game. And as you know, that was hanging in the balance in the fourth quarter. And then Temple finally, put it away and scored 60 points. And then they had to go to USF. And USF, as I said, might be playing as well as anyone in the country. Right?
Really good team.
Yeah, they really are. And I think the Temple people compared them favorably on defense with Notre Dame and other teams. They're really good. And as you know, they would have been a formidable, if Temple faltered, and USF had been in our championship game, they would have been a very dangerous team to play. They gave Navy a tougher game than virtually anyone until the Houston game. So anyway, Temple then has to play them on the road. Okay, that was a tough loss, but Temple then has to go and come home and with everything on the line now, play a really good Memphis team with Paxton Lynch, and played great. Played a great game against Memphis, and then had to play UConn. And UConn is a tough team. Bob Diaco has done a nice job with that defense. They're a team that is very dangerous, and they had beaten Houston the week before, albeit without Houston's quarterback. But still, not an easy situation, and Temple played a great game on both sides of the ball in that game as well. I would argue that that's as tough a gauntlet as these teams face in any of these other conferences. And I'm looking at the Big 12, and I see struggling teams with Iowa State, Kansas State, Kansas, and Texas Tech and others. And I see teams that have had a significant amount of injuries, and teams that have been challenged defensively. And I see teams in other conferences that have been struggling with their seasons. And I see teams in the ACC that we defeated 4 of those teams with our top teams. And I say, there's nothing wrong with those conferences. They're good conferences, but ours is just as good. And Temple had to play just as tough a schedule as they did, and should be getting credit for it. Once we got through October with the way we played, Zach, in the non-conference, and part of it was the game against Notre Dame, the win over Ole Miss by Memphis, some of the other games we won, the Miami game with Cincinnati. Once we did that, I felt that our conference games should then count for so much more than they did a year ago or 2 years ago, because we had proven in the non-conference that we could play with anyone. And I believe that firmly. And I think you'll see a great championship game Saturday. It's going to be a national game on ABC, great showcase game. I think the entire committee gets together over the weekend and they'll watch the game, national TV audience. I think it's a fascinating matchup because this is a tremendous Temple team with a rugged defense and a very good offense, an underrated offense with Jahad Thomas and P.J. Walker and some of your receivers, good offensive line. You're going to be playing against a very, very talented, opportunistic Houston defense, which shut down Navy, which very few teams have been able to do, and also an offense that has, Greg Ward, a playmaker, and has some great receivers. They did have a banged-up offensive line, but they've stabilized. They'll be in front of, obviously, a home crowd by virtue of their record this year, getting home field advantage. But, again, it should be just a tremendous game, and there's a lot riding on it, a lot at stake. what our conference aspired to be. We're very excited about it, and I wish both teams well, and I wish the people at Temple good luck. They really have earned the right to be there, and have had a great year. And we'll now have to try to continue to convince the country that we belong in that P6 conversation.
So I'll ask you this on the way out with the commissioner of the American Athletic Conference and Mike Aresco. 4 teams to me for that college football playoff just doesn't seem enough. Would you be a proponent for expanding that to maybe 8 or 10 or 12 teams?
Well, Zach, much as if it were expanded, we would have a better shot at it. I'm not going to argue that point. But it is tough on our kids, on our student athletes, and I think we have to think long and hard if we're going to expand it. If you go to 8, that means, one team is going to be playing, 3 additional games in addition to a championship game, which essentially means they're playing 16 games. Actually, 2 teams are playing 16 games, whoever plays in the championship game. And others are going to be playing 15. Whereas now with the 4 team, you're playing 2 more games, and while it's not easy, at least it's a little more manageable. It's awfully tough, at this level of competition, to be playing those kinds of games. And I know you could point out Division III and Division II and say, well, they play 16-team playoffs and all, but as you know, it's not the same. The pressures aren't the same. The physical nature of the games isn't quite the same. It just isn't, the commitment isn't the same in terms of time. And they would argue, they wouldn't argue that it was the same. So therefore, I think you really have to think hard about whether you can do that with your student athletes. I think it's something that's going to be discussed more and more the next few years, obviously. There's also talk about maybe you have 6 teams and 2 teams have a bye, so therefore, you don't really, ask teams to play more games. And also the bye means that the 2 teams that get that bye will be in better shape, so they'll compete pretty hard during the season to be the top 2 teams. It keeps everybody as motivated as possible. That's one thing you could, I suppose, look at. But I will say this, if there's ever a vote to expand it, and again, I don't know where our conference stands yet. I know that I have some real concerns based on the things I just said, because student-athlete well-being has to be paramount. If it ever does expand for whatever reason, then we ought to have a guaranteed spot in it. I really do believe we should. Whether it's a group of 5 spot at this point, I'd love to have one for us. I would love to have a contract game. I wish we did. We don't. 3 years ago, we were in really turmoil and disarray, and therefore our conference wasn't even remotely the same. If it had been this conference 3 years ago, I think we might have had a very good shot to be in that contract bowl rotation, and that would put us probably more firmly in the P6 conversation. We'll try down the road to get that, but in terms of an expanded playoff, we would absolutely want a spot for a group of 5 team, because we deserve it, and we deserve to be able to show what we can do. As I said, college football has dramatically changed. Scholarship limits, the coaching, the bigger talent pool. It's a bigger country now. More people playing football. You have a chance to compete in a way that maybe you didn't 20 or 30 years ago. And our teams are really good, and it's just a question of, even when we've had great results, we're still fighting that P5 mystique, so to speak, getting credit for simply being a P5 team, and the conversation primarily during the year being on P5. And we have to fight that. We will. I think we're going to just keep chipping away at it. And I think Temple and Houston can make a real statement this weekend, and then the winner can make another further statement if the winner plays in the New Year's Day Bowl, just as UCF, by the way, did against Baylor 2 years ago, which I think the media may have unfortunately forgotten about a little bit, because you saw how dominant they were, and you also saw that their players were just terrific, and in many cases better than who they were playing, because they won the game and they won it in decisive fashion. And I hope people keep that in mind. And also, Boise last year came from the group of 5 and beat Arizona in a bowl game. So it's happened quite a bit, and I think it's going to happen more in the future.
Commissioner, we appreciate a few minutes. We'll see you in Houston on Saturday. Thanks so much.
Zach, thanks for having me, and again, enjoy the trip down there, and hope to see you there, and good luck, again, to everyone at Temple. Thank you.